What drives an athlete to cross the line between competitive spirit and unsportsmanlike conduct? In women's basketball, a disturbing pattern is emerging, and it's not about scoring points anymore. The recent clash between Dejanay Carrington and Kate Martin has sparked intense debate about player safety and professionalism in professional women's basketball. The world of women's basketball has been rocked by yet another controversial incident, and folks, we need to talk about it. The recent clash between Dejanay Carrington and Kate Martin isn't just another game highlight. It's a window into a troubling pattern that's emerging in professional women's basketball. Now, if you've been following the sport, you might remember Carrington from her infamous encounter with Caitlin Clark last season. Yeah, that eye-gouging incident that had everyone talking.
She's also NaLyssa Smith's girlfriend, boyfriend. What are y'all calling each other? Nobody knows. Yikes. Anyway, by the way, NaLyssa Smith, I think, is still on the fever. What's taking so long there?
Well, it seems lightning does strike twice. And this time, Kate Martin found herself on the receiving end of what many are calling questionable tactics.
But Kate Martin is playing on an arrival team, and so's Dejanay Carrington. And Dejanay was up to her old tricks last night. Just so happens, I'm just going to point this out. Kate Martin is white. All right? She's a white gal. Yeah.
Let me paint you a picture of what went down in the unrivaled league game. The Laces were facing off against the Mist, and on paper, this should have been all about basketball skills. The Mist's lineup is stacked. We're talking Brianna Stewart, Jewell Loyd, and yes, Dejanay Carrington. But sometimes, what happens on the court tells a completely different story. Here's where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean concerning. Carrington, who was having what we'll politely call an off night, shooting 1 for 10 from the field with just 2 points, seemed to shift her focus from playing basketball to playing something else entirely? And that something else? Well, that's what we need to discuss.
Well, check this out. Here we go, down the court. All right, Kate Martin drive to the basket, boom. How about another clothesline from hell? And the smirk and the smile once again on a player's face. Yeah, that's Dejanay Carrington once again.
The incident that's got everyone talking happened during what should have been a routine play. Kate Martin, showing the kind of aggressive offense that's made her a fan favorite, was driving to the basket. What happened next looked more like something from WWE than the WNBA. Carrington delivered what fans are now calling the clothesline from hell, and trust me, that's not an exaggeration. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. While Martin was collecting herself after the hit, cameras caught something that's become unfortunately familiar: Carrington's smirk. Now, I'm not one to read too much into facial expressions, but when you've got a pattern of similar reactions following similar incidents, it's hard to ignore.
I don't know that influenced this, but it just seems kind of odd how this keeps happening out there involving Dejanay Carrington and Kate Martin. In this case, before it was Caitlin Clark. And does Caitlin Clark's relationship, and what I mean is friendship, with Kate Martin, is that influenced here in this, once again, egregious action?
Let's talk about what this means for the sport. Women's basketball has been fighting for respect, recognition, and fair coverage for years. The game has evolved into a showcase of skill, strategy, and athleticism. But incidents like these, they threaten to overshadow all that progress. Instead of discussing Martin's impressive court vision or Stewart's dominant performance, we're talking about dangerous plays and potential injuries. And speaking of injuries, let's address the elephant in the room: player safety. These aren't just aggressive plays we're talking about. These are potentially career-ending moves. In a league where players often have to supplement their income by playing overseas during the off-season, an injury doesn't just end their season. It could devastate their entire career. Now, some might say, well, basketball is a physical sport, and they're right. Contact is part of the game. But there's a world of difference between playing tough defense and what we witnessed in this game: The line between competitive physicality and dangerous play isn't as blurry as some might suggest. What's particularly interesting about this situation is the connection to the Caitlin Clark incident. Martin and Clark aren't just former teammates, they're close friends. And now, both have found themselves on the receiving end of Carrington's aggressive style of play. Is this just coincidence? The basketball community isn't so sure. Let's dive into the numbers for a moment, because they tell an interesting story. In the game where this incident occurred, the Laces actually dominated the Mist. Despite having what looks like a super team on paper, the Mist couldn't get their rhythm going. Carrington's 2 points on 10 attempts tell part of that story. But when you're struggling with your shot, the answer isn't to start throwing clotheslines. The fan reaction has been swift and unified. Social media exploded within minutes of the incident. Comments ranged from concern to outrage, with many pointing out that this kind of behavior is exactly why some players might think twice about joining certain leagues. When physical safety becomes a genuine concern, it changes the entire dynamic of professional sports. And let's talk about that dynamic for a moment. The Unrivaled League is trying to establish itself as a serious professional organization. Incidents like these don't just affect the players involved, they impact the league's reputation, sponsorship opportunities, and potentially its long-term viability. In a sport that's fighting for more media coverage and financial support, this kind of publicity is the last thing anyone needs. The broader implications for women's basketball can't be ignored either. Young athletes watching these games are learning what's acceptable on the court. What message are we sending when aggressive fouls are met with smirks rather than remorse? How does this shape the future of the sport? There's also an interesting parallel to draw with other professional sports here. In the NBA, we've seen how the league has evolved over the years to protect players and promote skillful play over physical intimidation. The WNBA and other women's leagues are at a crucial point where they need to decide what kind of game they want to showcase. The financial aspect of this situation is particularly intriguing. Players like Martin have options. They can play overseas where many leagues offer substantial contracts without this level of physical confrontation. When players start weighing their options between playing domestically or internationally, incidents like these absolutely factor into their decisions. Let's also consider the officiating angle. The refs have one of the toughest jobs in sports, making split-second decisions that can impact games and careers. But when patterns of aggressive play emerge, should there be more proactive measures taken? Should leagues implement stricter penalties for dangerous plays, especially when there's a history of similar incidents? The response from league officials has been notably measured so far. While they've acknowledged the incident, many fans are calling for more decisive action. The question becomes, how do you balance maintaining the physical nature of basketball while ensuring player safety? This isn't just about one incident or one player. It's about the direction of women's basketball as a whole. As the sport continues to grow in popularity and visibility, these moments become increasingly significant. They shape public perception, influence young players, and potentially impact the sport's development at all levels. Another aspect worth examining is the role of team leadership in these situations. Coaches and veteran players have a responsibility to set the tone for their teams. When aggressive plays become a pattern, at what point do team leaders need to step in and address the behavior? The media coverage of this incident has been interesting as well. While some outlets have focused solely on the physical aspect of the confrontation, others have delved deeper into the underlying issues it represents. This includes discussions about sportsmanship, professional conduct, and the evolution of women's basketball as a whole. Looking ahead, this incident might serve as a catalyst for change. Whether that change comes in the form of stricter officiating, clearer guidelines about acceptable physical play, or a broader conversation about sportsmanship in women's basketball remains to be seen. But one thing's clear, the status quo isn't sustainable. Now, let's dig deeper into what this whole situation means for the future of women's basketball. Because trust me, there's a lot more to unpack here. The Carrington Martin incident isn't just about one rough play. It's a symptom of bigger changes happening in the sport. First off, let's talk about something that's been buzzing in basketball circles: the growing intensity of women's basketball. The game has evolved dramatically over the past decade. We're seeing faster play, more physical contact, and higher stakes than ever before. But with this evolution comes a crucial question. Where do we draw the line between intense competition and dangerous play? You know what's fascinating about this whole situation? The timing. We're in an era where women's basketball is getting more attention than ever before. TV ratings are up, social media engagement is through the roof, and players are becoming household names. Caitlin Clark's influence on the sport has been nothing short of revolutionary. And here's the thing. With all these eyes on the game, every incident gets magnified. Speaking of Clark, let's connect some dots here. It's probably no coincidence that Kate Martin, one of Clark's closest friends and former teammates, has found herself in this situation. There's a whole subplot here about relationships and rivalries in women's basketball that nobody's really talking about. The sport is still tight-knit enough that most players know each other, have history with each other, and those relationships can affect what happens on the court. Now, here's something interesting about the Unrivaled League that we need to discuss. This league was supposed to be a game changer, right? A new format, exciting matchups, different rules, all designed to showcase the best of women's basketball. But incidents like this raise some serious questions about the league's direction. When you have a shorter season and more intense games, does that create an environment where players feel pressured to make their mark through physical play? Let's talk money for a minute, because it's a huge factor that nobody wants to address directly. Players in women's basketball often make a fraction of what their male counterparts earn. This creates a situation where they feel pressure to stand out, to make headlines, to build their brand. But here's the million-dollar question. Is negative attention better than no attention at all? The international aspect of this situation is particularly interesting. Many WNBA players spend their off-seasons playing overseas, where the style of play can be quite different. European leagues, for instance, often emphasize skill and finesse over physical dominance. Players like Kate Martin have options. They can choose to play in leagues where they might face less physical risk and potentially earn more money. This incident might make some players think twice about which path they want to take. Here's another angle that deserves attention: the role of social media in all of this. Within minutes of the incident, clips were circulating online, opinions were being shared, and narratives were being formed. The court of public opinion moves fast, and in today's digital age, reputations can be made or broken in the time it takes to post a tweet. Players need to be aware that every action on the court can become a viral moment, for better or worse. Let's talk about the coaching perspective for a minute. Coaches at every level of women's basketball are watching incidents like this and adjusting how they prepare their players. It's not just about teaching basketball skills anymore. It's about preparing players for the physical and mental challenges of an increasingly intense sport. How do you teach players to be tough without crossing the line? How do you prepare them for physical play while ensuring they stay true to the spirit of the game? The officiating question is crucial here too. Refs in women's basketball have one of the toughest jobs in sports. The game is faster than ever, more physical than ever, and they have to make split-second decisions that can impact not just the game, but players' careers. Should there be different training for officials in women's basketball? Should the rules be adjusted to better protect players while maintaining the flow of the game? Here's something that's not getting enough attention: the impact on youth basketball. Young players watch these games, they see these incidents, and they learn from them. What message are we sending to the next generation of players? Are we telling them that this is what it takes to succeed in professional basketball? The ripple effects of incidents like this can influence the sport for years to come. The sponsorship and business side of this can't be ignored either. Women's basketball is in a crucial period of growth, with new sponsors coming in and more media attention than ever. Incidents like this could affect potential partnerships. Companies want to associate with positive stories, with skill and excellence, not with controversial plays and potential injuries. Let's talk about player development for a moment. In today's game, players need to be more versatile than ever. They need to be able to handle physical play, sure, but they also need to know how to respond to it professionally. The most successful players are often those who can keep their cool under pressure, who can respond to physical play with skill rather than retaliation. The mental health aspect of all this deserves attention too. Players who become targets of aggressive play have to deal with not just the physical toll, but the mental strain as well. Knowing that you might be targeted on the court can affect your game, your confidence, and your enjoyment of the sport. This is something that leagues need to address, How do you protect not just players' bodies, but their mental well-being too? Here's an interesting perspective to consider. The role of team chemistry in all this. Basketball is a team sport, and how a team responds to incidents like this can define their season. Do they rally around their targeted player? Do they change their style of play? Do they seek revenge? These decisions can impact team dynamics and season outcomes. The media coverage of women's basketball is evolving, and incidents like this present a challenge for journalists and commentators. How do you cover these stories responsibly? How do you address the physical nature of the sport without sensationalizing dangerous plays? The narrative around women's basketball is still being shaped, and how these incidents are covered plays a huge role in public perception. Looking ahead, what does this mean for the future of women's basketball? The sport is at a crossroads. As it continues to grow in popularity and professionalism, decisions need to be made about what kind of game it wants to be. Will it embrace the physical nature of modern basketball while finding ways to protect players? Will new rules or enforcement strategies emerge? The role of player leadership is crucial here too. Veteran players have a responsibility to set the tone for the next generation. They need to demonstrate that success in women's basketball comes from skill, strategy, and sportsmanship, not from dangerous play or intimidation tactics. Innovation in the sport might provide some solutions. Better protective gear, clearer rules, more advanced training methods. All of these could help address the physical challenges of the modern game. But at its core, this is about culture and choices. What kind of sport do we want women's basketball to be? If you're as passionate about women's basketball as we are and want to stay updated on these important developments, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support helps us bring attention to these crucial issues in the sport. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We value your perspective on this ongoing situation. Until next time, keep supporting women's basketball, but let's hope for headlines about amazing plays rather than dangerous fouls.
ডগ সমতন দে যাতে মজা পায়